Hi there, this is Helen Tarrant again from Helen. Here with our whole team. Wow, it's massive. Welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. You're here with Helen Tarrant, and today I'm going to talk to you about warehouse properties and vetting out warehouse tenants and value in warehouse properties. Now, we've got lots of warehouse properties that are selling for ridiculous yields. I'm talking, 3% in Sydney and Melbourne. We're talking 5% in Brisbane, and we're talking 5.5%, maybe 5.25% in Sunshine Coast, and we're seeing that shrink. We're getting 6%, maybe a little bit more in Perth, but that's really a big mining town. And of course, even in regional areas like your Gladstones, like areas like your Townsvilles, you're getting somewhere 6.5% to 7.5%. Now, that has shrinked a lot from back 10 years ago. Back 10 years ago, warehouses was not something that people wanted to buy. There was definitely the property that people did not want to buy because every second warehouse was empty. Now, 10 years later, people don't realize they have forgotten about it. Investors totally have forgotten about that. Everyone wants to buy warehouses. And back in the day, 10 years ago, you could get 8-9% in Sydney. Today is 3%, right? So that same warehouse has tripled in price and some more. And then you've got, you've got some other properties up on the Sunshine Coast who only 2 years ago were doing like 7.5%. Today they're about 5.5% or even less, and they're anticipating it's going to shrink to 4%. Now, is that really sustainable in investing in warehouse properties? Now, I want to share with you what you would be looking for in a warehouse property, but mostly how you value a warehouse property, because it's really important because, are we paying crazy returns? Is it worth us paying crazy returns? And that's why I thought that maybe I should do this video, because there's such a craze in this market to buy a warehouse, right? So, firstly, what exactly is a warehouse property? Warehouse is an industrial property, so it's counted as industrial, so it's pretty much land. You've got a warehouse or a shed on it, and that's pretty much it. It's bare shell. Internally, it's pretty basic. You might get a little office or entrance for an office space. Then you may have a mezzanine floor that's already been built, or you need to build it. And it's got either, it's a reasonable height where you can get a truck into it, or it might be really quite tall, like 6 meters for those freight trucks, right? And then you've got two different types. You've got your, what I call a business industrial, which is somewhere around 200 square meters to 400 square meters. Then you've got your large format industrial, which is going to be more your anywhere from 600 to 800 to over 1,000 square meters. And it's usually freestanding on 2,000 or 3,000 square meters of land. Whereas your smaller warehouse is going to be in a strata lot with maybe potentially 6 or 8 or 10 of these little warehouses, and you're going to find that most people are going to be doing business to business rather than business to consumer. Of course, you can also have your karate schools, training colleges, ballet schools, associations in there as well. So warehouses are very, very versatile. And access, most of the time it's in an industrial hub, and it gives you access to lots of different freeways and artillery roads and major roads. So it's really, really great. And that's why most people, especially during the pandemic, have moved their business from centering to retail into warehouse, because they can still do online businesses and still distribute out of warehouses. And then we're also seeing this other trend, which is, your office space tenant, which is like your accountants or lawyers. And now they've gone into industrial chic, which means that they're occupying an office space, or traditionally an office space or a warehouse space. And what they're doing is they're fitting it out to make, several offices in there, a little bit of a raised floor, and there's sort of a meeting area, a bit of an open plan. So it's got that chic modern look to it, but they're again in more of a warehouse space or an open space, right? So this is why now all of a sudden there's very little vacancies in warehouses. But does that mean you should be paying anywhere from 2 to 4% or 5% for a warehouse property? Should you? This is where things get interesting. Now, where you have an office or retail space, it's easy to value that because you've got next door's rent, you've got the type of tenant, you've got the versatility in the area. And so it's good to do, likes, right? And then you've got office spaces, and everyone in the buildings being sold at $10,000 a square meter or $6,000 a square meter, and they're all getting rents of $500 or $700 a square meter. So those things are easy to value. Like the intrinsic value, whether you have a tenant or you don't have a tenant, is there. Now, warehouse properties are different. It is probably the property that will drop the most value if you don't have a tenant in there and you don't spend time to refurbish it to get a new tenant in there. So let's just say that you have a warehouse property and you have a logistics tenant like an Amazon or a Pet Barn or Toll, something like that is quite, large. Now, obviously, that's all of a sudden worth a lot of money. Like, it's quadrupled in value from just a plain warehouse because you've got logistics in there, and they probably have their hoist in there, they probably have their equipment in there, they probably have assembly lines in there, and they probably have some automation in there, and they get trucks coming in and out. Recently we saw this massive fertilizer warehouse where, it is literally 8,000 square meters, right? So, you've got those where the tenant is the value of it. And look, it is probably those who are very specific to the value because those tenants are seeking those locations and those areas. And once one tenant leaves, you can put another tenant in there, right? So that retains the value. But one of the things to bear in mind is that the value of a warehouse property as a bare shell does not bear the same value as you would any other type and class of commercial property. The reason for it is there's nothing you can improve in it. Right? You can build a mezzanine floor. It's not most of the time worth painting because it's concrete floor, roller doors, and pretty functional and basic. You can do an office and do that up quite nicely with sort of glass windows, glass fronts, sliding doors, painted. You can put aircon in there. That can be done really nicely. But really, there's not much else. You can obviously, get mezzanine approved, make sure it's weight bearing. But apart from that, it's very functional, right? You have to make sure it's functional for other businesses for it to retain its value. By itself, intrinsic value, it is probably the most that is likely to drop in value the most from having a tenant to not having a tenant. So this is where most investors get it wrong because all they see is the now value, not the future value or what could happen if there is a dip, right? And this is why I'm making a YouTube video about it. So, and to share with you that this is very important. So to start with, now, whatever tenant you have is the tenant that's going to give you cash flow. So that's fine. Now, you've got to look at how and what you can do with the property. So you've got to vet the warehouse to say, does it have a turning bay? Does it have parking? Is it secluded enough or is it trapped between two tenants where it's going to be harder for me to find a tenant? Is it going to be something that I can change this tenant that is, let's say, they're a crushing business of some materials and they do testings of soils, and can I change that to, maybe a martial arts tenant or maybe a tenant that has equipment there and they ship it out. So you got to look at things, access ways, is this blocking anywhere parking, roller doors, is it easy to find the location, and then of course am I going to be outbuilt, right? Because when there's lots of green fields, people are not going to build your commercial buildings like retail and office space. They're going to whack up warehouses because it's easy, simple, and relatively cheap, and of course they've got the demand there. So you got to make sure that whatever you're buying, you're not paying the top dollar because the next step is that you are not going to want to compete with other people who are new warehouses who want a certain price point for the new warehouses and the new build. You don't want to compete with them if you retain it. So when you do buy warehouse properties, these are the things we look at. Improvements that you can make to the warehouse to make it and keep and retain its value. So you got to think about that, and you got to think about that outside the box and the kind of tenant. Location. In terms of logistics, is it close to an airport? Is it close to a freeway? Is it close to a major transport hub? Is it close to other anchor tenants? Is it close to a necessity or a depot that a tenant needs to be there for? Right? So that's number 2. Number 3, what can you do to add value to the actual property if the tenant comes out? mezzanine floors? Can you change it to where it becomes, suits different other type of tenant that's not necessarily a traditional warehouse tenant? Also, whether it's just a tilt, whether it's a tilt slab, where it's just, concrete tilt slabs, where it's just, where it's simple and easily constructed, or is it like a metal one where, you could, refurbish it internally or cut it up? Is it better to be able to cut it up into smaller ones, or maybe, fit it out internally for self-storage, right? So there's some consideration. And then, of course, parking, and whether you're in the way of other tenants and other neighbors as well, because those are the things that are important when you come to re-tenant. Because let's say you put a mechanic in there, they're going to be going, well, I'm going to have cars in and out, and if that's going to piss someone else off, then I'm going to have a fight with someone else who, might also need the parking space. So you got to think about those things as well. So it's all about, when you vet the property different from the tenant to say, is it going to hold its value in the future? And what is it, to the best of my guesstimate, because we don't have a crystal ball, in the next 5-10 years, is it going to hold its value? And that's what I think about when I put a client into a warehouse property. Is it going to hold its value? Is the current tenant going to be there? And what can I do to improve the value, or how can I do to cut up the property into multiple smaller or different properties into the future, should this tenant leave as well? So, because warehouse properties, when you vet them, obviously you vet the tenant just the traditional way of all the ways you vet a tenant during your due diligence. And if you want to find out, go and check out my other videos on due diligence. But also, the value of the warehouse property needs to hold its own more than anything else. And most people forget that when they're investing in warehouse properties, right? So hopefully this video has been helpful and have made you think about warehouses a little bit different. If you want someone to help you out in your commercial property journey, especially now in this market where everything is just getting pivoted and turning on its head with all the interest rates going on and the yields not changing, reach out to us, helentarrant.com, drop us a message, and let's get on call and let me help you build your commercial property portfolio. Build it together. In the meantime, hit the bell, subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye for now.